What we need, quite frankly, I think, is a revolution in our worldview, how we see ourselves in relationship to nature, and in particular to these large carnivores.
Wolves, bears, mountain lions, the magnificent animals at the top of the food chain. Even their names evoke the majesty and mystery of wild America. But today, together with smaller predatory wildlife, they often struggle for survival. For generations, predator has been a dirty word, even when applied only to wildlife. But we are now coming to realize how important these animals are, and how nature's balance unravels without them. All across America, biologists, government officials, conservationists, and even ranchers and hunters are gaining a new understanding of the value of predators and working actively for their protection. It may not be a moment too soon.
If you want nature in your backyard, you have to take nature on her terms and not our terms. And her terms include carnivores and the big predators.
They've been waiting since before sunup, above the Lamar Valley, and they've been watching for the wild wolves of Yellowstone. In the grass, bones where the wolves took down an elk. In the air, howls. But where are the wolves? Eyes turn to an animal moving quickly. Is it? No, it's a solitary coyote keeping safe distance from his bigger relatives. Then, there they are, across the valley. A few dark shapes scurrying through the sage. Even at a distance, there is something magical about them. And people are coming here from all across America just to be where the wolves are, just to know they are there.
I have relatives come from California, go to Yellowstone Park, see a wolf. That's the best thing they've ever seen. If you ever see a wolf or hear one howl, you remember for the rest of your life. It's one of the truly magnificent experiences you can have in the outdoors.
They also symbolize healthy ecosystems. Having wolves in place mean all of the links on down to the lowest level are intact. And I think people are aware of greater environmental connections nowadays than they used to be.
And yet there are only a handful of places where Americans have any hope of seeing wolves in their natural habitat.
Wolves were the most widely distributed mammal in the northern hemisphere. They have been reduced from 98% of their original range. Ever since humans came in contact with wolves, they've been eliminated.
For Yellowstone's other great predator, the story is the same. Once, grizzly bears roamed throughout the western United States.
Between 1850 and 1920, which is a 70-year period, humans managed to extirpate grizzly bears from about 95% of that range. And between 1920 and 1970, we lost most of what was left.
And what is true for the wolf and the grizzly is true for other predators. Early settlers moving westward marveled at the power and grace of wild carnivores. But at the same time, they feared them and tried to exterminate them.
Certainly it's legal to protect yourself and your family.
The fear persists to this day. At a public forum in rural Arlington, Washington, state fish and game officers teach local residents how to avoid dangerous interactions with cougars and other carnivores.
Always make yourself larger than the cat. Make yourself a real hard target.
John Hanron edits the weekly newspaper in Washington's remote Methow Valley. Not long after building a home in the area, John had an unexpected encounter.
20 yards in front of me, I saw the face of a cougar looking right at me. He had a fawn under his paws and was in the process of killing it.
Now John Hanron takes precautions appropriate to living in cougar country.
You cover up your garbage. If you've got chickens or livestock, you want to make sure that they're protected. Small cats and pets can be vulnerable, and so you bring them in at night.
But cougars rarely attack humans.
The number of attacks over the past century have averaged about 1/2 of a fatality per year and about 2 non-fatal attacks per year. So if we compare that to almost anything, even rattlesnake bites, black widow spiders, getting killed by a domestic dog, I mean, it would rank very, very low on anybody's list of things to worry about.
In fact, more Americans die from bee stings or lightning strikes than from all predatory animals combined. Despite his fear of cougars, John Hanron believes in protecting them. But until recently, few Americans felt like he does.
And it wasn't until about the 1960s that people began to question their view of all predators. And up until that time, all predators were considered bad, and the policy was to kill them.
In some circles, it still is.
Millions of predators have been killed in the name of livestock protection. Roughly about $10 million each year is spent to kill wildlife. And a lot of this killing is done on public lands. It's also done on private lands.
The killing is done primarily by a federal agency called Wildlife Services. At taxpayers' expense, animals are routinely trapped and poisoned.
Other methods include aerial gunning, where they shoot coyotes and other predators from the air, from helicopters or low-flying aircraft. And just in 1998, they killed about 25,000 coyotes with this method, primarily in the western United States.
Come on, guys.
America's farmers and ranchers do face harsh economic realities. Losses of livestock can push smaller operators over the edge into bankruptcy. But the reasons for such losses are many. Take cattle, for example. Of those that never make it to market, only 2% die from animal attacks. Most are lost to extreme weather, disease, and other causes. Yet often, wild animals unfairly take the blame, becoming scapegoats for the other economic difficulties facing ranchers. And so the killing continues. But even if it stopped tomorrow, the prognosis for predators would still be troubling. Set aside in 1872 as the world's first national park, Yellowstone is protected country. Here, bison, hunted nearly to extinction on the nearby plains, roam freely. So do elk. Once, their numbers were kept in balance by wolves and bears. Biologists now agree that predators are essential to maintaining healthy ecosystems. Large carnivores are often called keystone species because scientists recognize that without them, their prey overpopulate, upsetting the balance of nature. Too many deer and elk can strip an area of trees and grasses, leaving the animals to starve. Yellowstone needs its bears and wolves, and they in turn need room to roam.
The biggest loss or threat to them, of course, is habitat loss, especially for the bears, who require an enormous home range, because bears require seasonal food in order to survive, which doesn't necessarily all grow in one area. So a home range for a bear has to be quite large to cover all the different foods that bear is capable of eating.
But drawn by its natural beauty, fresh air, and pure water, people have been pouring into the greater Yellowstone ecosystem during the past decade. New development makes it harder for bears and other predators to migrate in search of food. Just outside Yellowstone Park, grizzly bears live out their lives in cages. Tourists gape at their immense size and power.
These animals are beautiful, they're intelligent, they require our protection, they require habitat, they require basically that we let them be what they are, which is wild animals.
But it's too late for these bears and many others. They cannot be released because they are thought to be a danger to humans. They have become conditioned to eating our food, which is too often left within their reach by careless residents or campers. Even in big wilderness areas like Yellowstone, predators face an uncertain future. But near our cities, they often cling to survival on slender threads.
They're getting pushed out. There's no place for them to go. It's inevitable. As we develop, we're going to lose the wildlife. There's not going to be any habitat for them.
Cindy Tracy and her husband Bob have been taking care of animals since she left a teaching position and he a government job to start this wildlife rehabilitation center near San Diego, California. It's a place where suburban sprawl is expanding into rural areas, forcing people and wildlife into unwanted interactions with tragic consequences for the animals.
They are routinely hit by cars. On one occasion, one was caught in a leg hole trap. Most of the bobcats we deal with come in as injured adults. We deal with probably 50, 60, 70 a year, hit by cars usually, some gunshot wounds, some poisonings.
Some of the animals here were shot or trapped because they attacked pets that had strayed from suburban homes.
We're going to live with the native wildlife around here. It's our responsibility to protect our domestic pets. That's, you don't let your cats out. You don't let your small dogs out, you know. It's not the predator's fault.
Despite the dangers, predators do survive just outside big cities. Seth Riley monitors the health of wildlife in the Santa Monica Mountains near Los Angeles, where sprawl pushes right to the boundaries of federally protected land.
We've been radio tracking bobcats and coyotes in this area for a number of years now, and really the idea is to learn about how these animals are doing in a very fragmented system. What we've been finding so far is that certainly both bobcats and coyotes do exist in this quite urban area.
Bobcats and coyotes in this area have been captured and fitted with radio collars so their movements can be tracked. Each is given a number which corresponds to a particular radio frequency.
We get to know the animals for sure, especially after you've been tracking them for a while. When you've been following an animal for a long time and then it dies, all of a sudden gets hit by a car or something, it's sort of wrenching a little bit in spite of being a scientist or whatever. And so
Seth Riley knows all too well the dangers facing wildlife in urban areas like this one. But frequent conversations with local residents have convinced him that people want to protect predatory animals.
Most people are really sort of excited that they hear coyotes at night, and they want to make sure we're not wanting to kill the animals or anything like that. But when they find out that we're trying to protect them and preserve the populations, they're very interested, and they all have many stories about this bobcat that they saw or this coyote that they've seen.
In rural America, as in the suburbs, attitudes toward predators are changing.
I figure if I can't find a way to coexist with the native species, then I shouldn't be ranching.
Becky Weed sells what she calls predator-friendly lamb and wool products.
A predator-friendly approach means that we make a commitment not to shoot or trap or poison any native species like coyotes or wolves or bears or mountain lions.
Becky had a different attitude when she and her husband Dave Tyler bought this ranch outside Bozeman, Montana several years ago.
When we first started with a small flock of sheep here, within a few weeks actually we lost a few sheep to coyotes, and we initially did what everybody does.
They called Wildlife Services. An agent came out and shot a coyote. Not long afterwards, Becky began looking for a better way to keep her sheep safe.
Really, the more we harass the coyotes, the more they tend to harass us. There's lots of evidence that we tend to select for the cleverest of the species by the way we have harassed coyotes. Primarily, our tool to protect our flock is a guard animal. We have a couple of llamas on our place. Come by. Easy now. Other people use guard dogs or burros, but the llamas are our main tool. And also, we use some electric fencing. We rotate the sheep and pass different pastures. We patrol the pastures at odd hours. Overall, really, in the last several years, we've been very fortunate. Since we got the llama, we basically have had almost no losses to coyotes, which is our principal concern right in this local area. I also think that ultimately it's the most practical approach.